Awesome, team. I think we can go and get started. Thank you so much for joining us on our deep dive session on Amazon Q and QuickSight. Good morning, good afternoon to wherever you are. So in this session, we're going to be focusing, of course, on Amazon Q and QuickSight and the generative BI capabilities. Before we jump into the agenda, though, to see what specific topics we'll be covering today, I want to do some quick introductions, starting with myself. So my name is Art Twazon. I'm a partner solutions architect here at AWS. Have been here for 3.5 years now, and I'm part of one of our technical field communities focused in analytics and specifically in QuickSight. And today, really happy to be presenting alongside two other of my colleagues. Kalyan, if you want to do a quick intro as well.
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. This is Kalyan Kumar Nilampudi, and in short, I go as KK. And I'm a specialist partner solution architect in analytics, and here with AWS for almost 7 years now. And yeah, Jackson, you want to take over?
Yeah, thanks, Kalyan. So hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. My name is Jackson Dowden, and I am also a partner solutions architect. I specialize in data analytics and specifically QuickSight. So I'm really excited to be here with you all today. One thing before I hand it back to Art to kick off, just want to point out, feel free to ask questions throughout the session and we'll try to address them as we go. But as you do that, please make sure to use the Q&A window instead of the chat, just to make sure that we can address each of your questions and that they don't get lost in the chat. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Art.
Perfect. Thank you, Jackson. Awesome. So we have a packed agenda today and a few demos that we prepared. So really excited to get through and learn about QuickSight. So quick overview for what today's going to look like. So data ingestion for Amazon Q and QuickSight, as well as some Amazon Q and QuickSight best practices, Generative BI best practices, and then Generative BI embedding that Jackson will go through. And then, of course, as always, like Jackson mentioned, feel free to ask any questions. The whole team is here to provide some support. So starting off with data ingestion. So really quick on that. So Amazon Q, builds on the existing functionality of QuickSight already. So adding to its unique architecture, which provides consistently high performance with auto scaling. So in this case, QuickSight manages the load for you, whether that's the storage of your data, report creation, et cetera. You don't have to provision or set up any servers in advance and scales as you need without you needing to configure anything. And that also applies to your cloud economics. So you don't have to worry about infrastructure management, whether that's one user today or 10,000 users tomorrow. QuickSight will handle that for you. There's nothing to prepare for. It's kind of already done. Additionally, it's just simple to use. So data managed via Spice, your refresh policy, user management. We've made it really easy to manage all of that directly within the QuickSight console. And then on top of this, QuickSight has several capabilities, including modern dashboards for reporting KPIs, analytics, as you would expect from a business intelligence tool, but also paginated reporting and CSV, PDF, and Excel downloads, exports, as well as embedded analytics, machine learning, natural language querying. But the idea here is that all of these live on a single unified platform, which makes it easier for your team to just learn one environment versus having to, traditionally move from one BI tool that focuses only on dashboarding and switching to another for reporting, and then another again for embedding. All of that's included in, in QuickSight in this one console that's really easy to use. And now on top of all of that, we've included Amazon Q. So we're making it even easier for you and your team and customers to gain insights from data, from both the reader and the authoring perspective. Amazon Q relies on this entire infrastructure and the data that you provide for its generative BI capabilities. And that's what we'll dive into next. So QuickSight Q, Amazon Q and QuickSight leverages what's called Q topics. And Q topics is an asset that powers these natural language queries. So Amazon QuickSight Q topics are stored in the QuickSight's proprietary infrastructure. Topic storage is managed fully by Amazon QuickSight, so customers don't have direct access to this underlying indexes or metadata stores. And when a Q topic is created or updated in QuickSight, it processes and indexes the underlying data sets to build an internal representation of that data and metadata. And the created Q topic is linked to one or more of those underlying data sets as the source of its data. And of course, these data sets can be stored in various locations like Amazon S3, Amazon Redshift, other databases. There's a number of different connections that QuickSight has, and it's growing, every single year. And then the first time a Q topic is created or refreshed, QuickSight will scan that linked data sets to build an index of that data. So this indexing includes identifying fields, sampling values, and detecting field types and formats. So QuickSight utilizes machine learning and natural language processing techniques during this initial scan and indexing process. And the initial goal is to understand the data schema and semantics. So QuickSight will, do its best on the first pass to identify for you in advance. And you'll still need to do some refinement, and that's what we'll also discuss in here as well. And again, so the index field values and mappings are stored separately from the source data set in Amazon QuickSight's backend infrastructure. And when the Q topic is queried or a user asks, a natural language question, QuickSight leverages this index to understand the question and then return relevant answers from the underlying data sets. So a little bit more on the index itself. So like we mentioned, the index is an internal index that QuickSight maintains to help power this natural language queries against the data in a Q topic. It does not actually store a copy of the underlying data set itself. And going through a little bit of this list. So a list of the unique value field or field values for each field is included in the topic data set, but the actual raw data from the data sets remains stored separately. And again, this allows QuickSight Q to understand the possible values that a field can contain. On the second bullet point, field mappings that link to dataset fields that link dataset fields to document fields in the index. So this helps QuickSight interpret those natural language questions, and this field mapping is exposed to users, and they can use this field mapping to curate and help Q understand the questions that's being asked. So things like that include, synonyms, data types, and other metadata about each field that are detected during the initial indexing process. So these are, again, all exposed to a user of a QuickSight Q topic, so they can go ahead and refine the topic to further address a diverse set of customer questions. So you can add semantics, synonyms. If you have a data field called customer, for example, but your organization, calls them something else like patron, Q can understand that specific jargon of your organization when they ask those questions, and will relay back information. So your customers or your organization doesn't have to relearn, QuickSight Q only wants customer. You can remain to use the same verbiage that you currently do. And then last on this, a record of the topics data sets and their refresh history. So the index does need to be refreshed to incorporate the latest data. By indexing and storing this metadata, QuickSight is able to understand the schema and contents of the topic data set without needing to scan the raw data each time a question is asked, which makes it, fast. And the index itself is, again, managed by QuickSight entirely behind the scenes. So nothing to prepare for in advance. All you need to do is refine to your customers or to your users. Awesome. So just touch a little bit on refreshing these Q topics. As I said, QuickSight Q topic is an index. It does not store the actual data, which is stored separately, either direct query mode in your databases or in QuickSight's proprietary SPICE, so the super fast parallel in-memory computation engine. And there are a couple of reasons for Q topics to be refreshed. One is that there might be changes to your underlying data. Either new values are added, new columns might be added. So all of these changes to your data set should be reflected in your topic so customers can have the most up-to-date on what they're viewing. And a couple of ways that you can refresh your topic. One here is mentioned is manual refresh, which needs to be kicked off manually, as the name suggests. And you can do this at any time by going into the Q topic itself and clicking on the refresh button, and that refreshes the entire topic and all the data sets included. Or you can also go into the topic, into the specific data set, and just refresh a specific data set if you wish. There's also the option to have the schedule refreshes as well. So you don't have to think about, clicking any buttons. So for direct query data sets, the refresh schedule can be set up from the data sets view within the topic. And then if the data set is, utilized in SPICE, the topic index refresh schedule can be set up to sync with the SPICE refresh schedule. And then our recommendation is that you update the topic indexes regularly to ensure that the latest definitions and values are being recorded. This generally takes approximately 15 to 30 minutes, depending on the number and size of the data sets that included in the topic. Awesome. And then when it comes to connecting to data hosted in VPCs, so QuickSight maintains its own infrastructure within QuickSight's own VPC. So this is a service managed VPC. This includes things like your SPICE dataset, IP addresses, and regional endpoints. So everything is maintained in QuickSight Managed VPC, but your data or your customer's data might be sitting on their own VPC. So QuickSight connects to this VPC to that VPC through an elastic network interface. I'll just have everything here. So when QuickSight connects to your private subnet, wherever your data is in AWS, whether that's Redshift or Aurora, QuickSight creates a lasting network interface by providing information about your VPC ID, your subnet group, and security group. And then based on this information, QuickSight also creates the elastic network interface through which you can either query your data set or refresh the Spice data set from those databases. Awesome. So that was on a little bit on the data ingestion portion. But I want to talk a little bit about the best practices for how you can leverage the QuickSight Q topic to better manage your user requests. So like I mentioned, so even though the index itself kind of does a lot of the heavy lifting for you and the index is managed by QuickSight, there is a lot of refinement that, as usual, when it comes to generative BI capabilities and natural language querying that you have to do on your data. So configuring topic metadata for Amazon Q is very important. There are certain things that QuickSight Q topic automatically takes care of when a topic is created, things like trying to match synonyms, changing the field names to more appropriate field names, or those business-friendly names and identifying semantics. And the machine learning ability of a Q topic creation is taken care of. But again, like I mentioned, on top of that, the user needs to make sure that their user questions are being addressed properly, so that we have Q topic must-haves as well as our recommendations. On the must-haves list, we have excluding field names that are unused. Most often we see that's the ID or the URL, as they don't really contribute to the topic indexing. So it makes it a bit easier to streamline that process. Just remove it and exclude it from the Q topic itself. And second on that list is give the topic and dataset descriptive names and metadata that clearly conveys the business context and subject area. So this helps QuickSight understand questions that the individuals are asking for. For example, if you have P underscore patient for patient, QuickSight really won't understand what that is if you're asking show me patients for this month. So best practice to give those business friendly names that QuickSight can understand. On the QuickSight best results to have for the best and optimal customer experience, again, we want to add some synonyms. So QuickSight end users aren't the most technical people, so adding synonyms to fields that they're most familiar with makes the most sense. Like I mentioned, if you have customer, but the jargon in your organization is to use patron or organization, then it makes sense to keep the same verbiage that you have, so as to not confuse your business users or your users. Second is adding calculated fields. Things like count of things might be relevant. So similar to how you can also add calculated fields at the dataset level. But in this case, since we also recommended to exclude like IDs and URLs, but those are usually relied on for the count as their unique identifiers. So this is where calculated fields are kind of helpful to bridge that gap for those excluded fields. So you can use create those calculated fields using counts or those unique identifiers that we excluded originally. Third, we have the semantic types, which help to enrich and simplify questions for users and helps Q understand and answer those, who, when, what, why kind of questions. So instead of asking, which month were sales the highest, you can just ask when were sales the highest. Or instead of asking, in what location, you can just ask where was this happening? And based on the type that you've identified that data type to be, is it currency or is it location? Q can understand what the question is and then provide the best response based on those keywords. And then last we have is named entity. So this is a grouping of fields that represents a business concept. So for example, when you ask for a purchase order, you would expect to see, a date, a sales price, a customer, and then items. But instead of asking all of that explicitly to Q, show me the, date, sales price, X, Y, and Z, you can just ask for, show me the purchase orders, and it'll show all of that to you automatically. So again, all of these work to provide better experiences to your customers. And once you have that all set up, once you've added more data and you're refreshing, you're adding more information, QuickSight Q also has the ability for users to provide feedback, so you can continually to optimize on those data sets. So there are two topic performance screens. So there's a topic performance the screen where you can just see the different historical user types and statistics over a period of time. And it'll show you things like, how many questions are answered, how many questions are not answered. statistics on user feedback, how many upvotes, downvotes, things like that. But then there's more granular type of screen where you can see the list of questions asked, unanswered questions, any positive feedback. Again, it's pretty high level, but you can also go down to the individual question and then the specific feedback and address an action on those, as well as link the answers with existing dashboards. So these are all opportunities for improvements, and you can even provide custom messaging on the screen to users to show that you notice that a question has been unanswered. There's not really a visual that's right for that question. You can add a custom note that says, we're aware of this and we're working on this concept and adding the visualizations instead of, this is not available, which doesn't really, bode well for optimal customer experience. And again, all of these will show in the demo. And before that, last thing on this one is working with datasets in QuickSight Q. So as I said, QuickSight Q does not maintain the dataset itself. So when Q queries the underlying data after the customer question has been interpreted, you can still maintain that data set. You can still work on that data set and address concerns that your customers have asked. So you can do these on two levels, so at the data set level function or by enriching the data set in the topic itself. So at the data set level function, that includes, maybe you need to add another data set to the topic itself. Maybe that means, row level security. Maybe it's as easy as refreshing the topic, or maybe just removing the topic altogether. And then on the enrichment side, things that we've already talked about, calculated fields, maybe adding filters, named entities, things like that. And then a quick note on the row level security. So this is also enforced on the topic level. So if you have multi-tenancy or you just in general have row level security enforced and only certain people or groups can have access to see and view certain things, this is also respected in Q topics. So when a group or user asks questions against a topic, that user or group will only see the answer and data that's applicable to them. So there's no concern there on row level security. Awesome. With that was a lot of information, but I think having, seeing the visuals is really helpful. So we prepared this demo in advance and we'll walk through this together. So really quick, awesome. Okay, perfect. So again, like I mentioned, we prepared this demo in advance, but in this video, we'll walk through together, the underlying QuickSight Q topic for this patient encounter data set with this imaginary healthcare provider company we've called Awesome Health Technologies, and how this Q topic has been enriched with all of the tools that we mentioned to provide a better response for users. So starting in this QuickSight console on this topics page, where we can see all of the topics created by or shared with our users. This demo is focusing on the patient encounter Gen BI topics. So that's what we select. And then we start by navigating to the data tab, like we mentioned, where we can see what data is being used for this topic. And on the screen, we can see all of the fields that are present in the linked data sets. And the first step for topic enrichment is, again, to remove any irrelevant fields or those that we don't want included in answers to users' questions. So for example, here we could choose to exclude any sensitive fields like social security numbers or fields that we really don't expect questions about, again, like row ID fields, things like that. So while scrolling through, we can see the topic owner has already gone through and excluded those fields by quickly using this topic. It just says include. And then for those fields that are included, we can make sure the fields have been given friendly names. As an example, in this underlying data set had a field called patient_city. Then we want to reformat that in a way that can be used in natural language as we've done here. So we've just had it as patient city. And you can also just really quickly rename by just double clicking. And then for each of these fields, in addition to those friendly names, we may have words or phrases that relate to the same thing. So for example, patient town or place could also be used to refer to patient city. So we can add field synonyms, as we've also done here. And then we can also map terms that aren't direct synonyms, but are meaningful for our organization. So for example, in the context of our data set, when users ask about a hotspot, for example, meaningful results will still return location information, which is the patient city. And then we can also add additional synonyms. We can remove them just with that really easy, plus sign. So now when users use these synonyms when asking questions in the Q&A, Q will map their questions to their correct fields as necessary. And for each of these data fields, we also have configuration options. So if we click on a field, it will open the configuration panel where we can explore those available options, including field descriptions, and then classifying the data as a dimension or a measure, signifying categorical or quantitative data respectively. And for each field, we can also specify the semantic and subtype. So possible semantic options depend on the previous classification, but you can see here that that could be classified as dates or identifiers, locations, people, or more. And then with that, there are also different subtypes depending on the chosen semantic type. So in this case, for example, location also has a subtype of zip code, countries, states, or cities. While some others, like person, don't have a further subtype, which makes sense. So we can quickly set this field back to location and have this as city. And then we'll move down from the patient city to a quantitative field like patient income. So this is a measure. So there were different semantic type options because this is also quantified as a measure, and this was configured as a currency in US dollars. So now in addition to the semantic types, we can also configure value formats. So you can specify date formats, and this one, for example, for date fields like month, day, year versus day, month, year. But for number types like this one, you can specify the format to include things like commas or no commas, and then how many digits after the decimal. Awesome. So finally, you can also specify both default and not allowed aggregations. So default aggregations is what's applied when the aggregation is not explicitly included in reader questions that use that field. On the other hand, we also have not allowed aggregations, which prevents fields from being aggregated in ways that don't really make sense. For example, like preventing ID fields from being summed or averaged. Just it doesn't make sense on that side. Cool. So with that, we've seen how we can configure how Q uses these data fields as well as field mappings with field synonyms. But we touched on it previously, but wanted to show more about specific field value synonyms. So to demonstrate this feature, we're moving to the smoker field status, and you can see that this is a Boolean. So there are only two values, so 0 and 1. That's being as expected. However, to translate the values of 0 and 1 to meaningful outputs, we can also configure field value synonyms. So just by clicking on this, here you can see how 0 has been given a synonym of a not or non-smoker versus, the value of 1 maps to a smoker and is smoking. So by doing this mapping, when users ask questions about smoking and they refer to non-smokers or smokers, Q will filter for the values of Q or 1 respectively. So you won't have to set that up. That's something that you can do within all this topic page. So we can look at this again, something similar for that has been defined or including immunizations, is immunized or not, as well as insurance status as shown here. So again, 0 refers to uninsured patients, while 1 means that they are insured. Cool. So scrolling down to the bottom, we can also see that the topic owners created multiple calculated fields as designated by this FX symbol. And then we can open this first field for health condition and see that this has been used to group ICD-9 descriptions into common keywords. So with using if else and contain statements, any ICD-9 description, including terms like lung or heart, have been mapped to those keywords. So by creating this calculated field, it allows users to ask questions about more general conditions rather than needing to know specific ICD-9 diagnoses, because that would be terrible. There's a lot of them. But also note how the general keywords on this side, so here, have been added as field synonyms to ensure that when a user does ask a question using those terms, that they do still map to this health conditions field. Cool. And then with that, we'll look at the two other calculated fields, so patient and facility count. So they both use the distinct count function. So then when questions are asked about number of patients, like how many patients are in a certain location or age group or classification, they will use this function to count the number of patients by unique patient IDs after filtering for the requested group. So again, I've talked about bridging the gap between the excluded fields, but still having them make sense in a business concept. So finally, having finished those configuration of all the data field sets, we can navigate to the named entity tab. So the named entity, like we mentioned, are the logical groupings of fields. So if the user asks, in this case, about patient details or encounters, we can define exactly which fields are relevant. So in this case, we've defined that the most relevant information is the health condition, discharge date, smoking, insurance, vaccination status, patient city, and their ICD-9 diagnosis description. So again, instead of having to ask explicitly for all of these when you ask for an encounter, you can just define it here and then ask it once. There's also field ranking. So this determines how the fields are used when generating responses. The top fields are health condition and discharge date. So when a user asks ambiguous questions about encounters, Q will prioritize that. showing those visuals that are ranked higher in those fields. Yes. And then we can simulate that by selecting the open Q&A button to see how Q would respond to an ambiguous question for encounters, for example. Since field names weren't specified, notice how Q creates these visuals from the highest ranked fields. So health condition and discharge date at the top. However, while the ranking has affected the generation of these values, the tabular data still at the bottom has all the fields that we defined as the name entity that we wanted to look for in the first place. And then we can also show how quickly Q responds if we change the field ranking to moving, smoking status to the highest rank. And then we can save this and then open Q&A again. And if we ask the same question about encounters, notice how the visuals have adjusted. So that smoking status is at the top, is now higher ranked, while again, we still maintain that what the details and tabular data that we're looking for is still what we're looking for. So with that, we've configured and enriched the Q topic. We're now ready to share it with the users or link it to our dashboard to allow them to start asking questions. And while users will have the freedom to ask whatever question they'd like, when they first open up the Ask Q panel, they will see some suggested questions. And you see, as topic owners, we can also configure what is shown there. So by navigating to that suggestion questions tab, we can see there are two types. So there's verified and AI generated questions. Verifieds are those that we have manually verified and marked as verified as the topic owners. And then switching to the AI generated, those were automatically generated by Q. And you can see we can view these questions. We can choose to remove individual ones that we don't like. We can also ask you to regenerate a whole list of questions or just hide them entirely if none of them make sense or if we don't want them to be to populate as well. And remove that. And then so as we open up the Ask You panel, this is what the users will actually see. We can see the distinction between those that are marked as verified manually or as AI generated from the side. And then now once users have begun asking questions to our topic, we can monitor this user activity in this tab. So here we can see what questions have been asked, about details about the user who asked them, as well as the question that has been submitted. So in this case, why did hard encounter spike? This is the user and it was submitted a day ago. And then we can also click on view for individual questions to see the response that was generated by Q to answer that user's questions. And as topic owners, this is also where we as can mark answers as verified or unmark them as verified if we know this is the response that we want our customers to see, for example. And then from this page as well, this is where the users would be able to provide feedback as either a thumbs up or thumbs down, as well as provide an additional comment. So for example, we provided a thumbs up comment. If we come back to this user activity page and click on refresh, we can see that the positive response has changed now from 2 to 3. So that was really fast. But with all of that, in addition to initially, configuring and enriching the topic, by also monitoring what questions are asked and how Q responds, and the feedback that we receive from end customers, us as topic owners your topic owners can continue to refine the topic configuration to improve Q performance, as well as the end user experience. Awesome. A lot of information there, but I'll go ahead and hand it off to Kalyan.
Thanks, Art. Can anyone of you confirm whether you can see my screen?
Yep, looking good.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So thanks for that, Art. Great demo. And let's jump into generative BI best practices. So, however, before moving to, let me set the right context around generative BI. So, generative BI is an extension of BI. It leverages generative AI capabilities to bring value to our customers, so that BI users do not have to worry about generative AI foundation models, fine-tuning the FM, or how to use the RAG. They simply use them through a set of pre-built capabilities within Amazon QuickSight that accelerates BI adoption. So generative BI is a novel way to generate content for business users. It is also novel to facilitate BI dashboard creation. So let's jump into that. So you're already familiar with the generative BI features, I assume. So let me just give a gist of that. The first thing is executive summaries, multi-visual analysis, and storytelling. So these are some of the aspects of the reader perspective. So the readers who do not want to build the dashboard, but already have the visuals or or they have the Q topic and they want to get answers to those. So AI answers to questions on that on data on demand. So executive summaries of dashboard leverages several data points around narratives and then creates or uses those narratives to address or to provide you a summary regarding the dashboard, right? Also, Generative BI has easy and powerful Q&A for users, suggested questions, even has multi-visual answers and vague question supports. One thing I want to highlight is the hotspot, which earlier Art has shown. So the hotspot field is actually set up as synonym to the location field, right? That is the city column in the earlier shown demo data. So if we see the feedback gathering process, if you go to the Q topic feedback page, which Art had already shown, a lot of customers are asking about hotspot on certain other terms, right? So if we correlate those terms and then incorporate those terms to properly address the city column, that's how you add the hotspot into the patient location field. That's how any field which is like commonly referred can be integrated and make the generative BI learn on top of it. Now for AI-assisted storytelling, interpreted data for others' generative stories using AI. So it uses cohesive, powerful story using large language models, but being very consistent based on the data that it captures, or essentially the user who has selected, right? So which visual they wanted to build and so on. So it really depends on what they wanted to achieve. That way it will not be hallucinated, but more geared towards, like what has been captured so far, what is in the data point showing and all of that. So these are certain best practices around how you can make sure that the data being captured within these visuals are properly addressed within your data stories, and you're going to be talking about that. So a little bit of insights. So insights are actually helping build those narratives and also multi-story, multi-visual stories. So when you build a QuickSight analysis and you actually point those analysis to QuickSight Generative BI story, as well as QuickSight Q topic for multi-visual analysis. So when you build these visuals, QuickSight generates, different suggested insights. The suggested insights are actually the narratives which are highlighting data points from your analytical data, right? So for example, I have total encounters by city or hotspots, right? So these data points or these narratives are generated by QuickSight automatically because I'm interested to look into this kind of patient data across cities. So these are the auto narratives, and QuickSight provides several kind of auto narratives. For example, if you have a line chart or maybe a time series data, or you have say forecast or anomalies, and all those narratives will be generated. It could be other visual types also, not limited to this, like bar chart, heat map, because those are addressing more informational data points. It will relieve you by creating those narratives automatically instead of building your own narratives. However, you can choose to create your own narratives as well, which is controlled by authors as shown on the screen. Um, and you need not need to sit through the visual drill down or maybe comparing values or rechecking ideas to extract a conclusion. So you also don't have to try to understand what the data means. QuickSight identifies relevant insights from the data and it keeps the communication updated as and when the underlying data changes. So these insights are automatically computed, narratives are automatically generated, replacing tables and charts. So however, we have seen earlier, right? You can customize it, however, but QuickSight also suggests those insights for you. With that said, I just want to quickly jump into the demo part of it. So let me start. So yeah, for this demo, I'll only be pausing here and there. So just to give more insights into the demo, like how we are going about it. So it's already pre-recorded. We don't want to have any last minute hassles. So that's the reason. However, I'm going to clearly explain like what each individual part of the demo signifies. So for this demo, we are going to be using a dataset from an imaginary healthcare provider company called Awesome Health Technologies. So which already Art has covered. So it provides healthcare patients management software to global health facilities. And from the sample dataset, this Amazon QuickSight dashboard has been created to analyze patient encounters. So that's what the analysis is about. So looking at the first row of visuals, these are key performance indicators or KPIs that display high-level metrics on the entire encountered patient population. So this includes the total number of patients and encounters, the number of ethnic groups, total immunizations, and the number of encounters by patient, and the insurance status. So these KPI visuals have been formatted to include area sparklines, with trend groups by discharge date, monthly, allowing users to see how these metrics have changed over time. Below these KPIs, we have a series of visuals for analyzing demographics. The first donut chart on the left is showing the different service lines. As we hover over the different slices, we can see more details in this case where we can see 87% of the encounters were classified as outpatient, meaning that the patients received medical treatment without being admitted to a hospital. To the right, we have histogram showing the age distribution of patients. And by hovering over each bin, we can see that each range is and the count of encounters from the group. Similarly, we can explore the breakdown of encounters by both gender and ethnicity in the adjacent values. So the next selection of this dashboard includes encounter data by facilities. And this dataset contains data from facilities across 5 states. This is shown in the map visual on the left, where the darkness of the state corresponds to the number of encounters. So we can see that the state of Texas is the encounter hotspot, since the color of Texas is dark compared to other states present in California and New York. So if you click an individual state like Texas, then the accompanying Sankey diagram and the radar chart will update to show the data of these cities and hospitals in the state respectively. So now this Sankey diagram shows a breakdown of ethnic group encounters in cities in Texas, and the radar chart shows how various ethnic groups are populating the hospitals inside Texas. So now let's analyze how various patient habits and immunizations are trending with the patient age and ethnic group that is below. So let's just give a second. Yeah, here. So yeah, here the grouping is controlled here by control, which is rendering to adjacent 3 visuals. When ethnic group is selected, the next 3 charts are grouped by ethnic group, whereas when age group is selected, they will be grouped by age group. We can see how toggling between grouping updates the visuals, and that is reflected in tiles as well. In the first tree map, allergies are currently meds by age group. We can hover over individual blocks to see how the number of patients in each age group who both have allergies and currently have medication. For example, the uh, largest block in the patients of over 70. And this could be important for hospital admins to monitor and consider special facilities required for the age group, right? And in the scatter plot titled Correlation Between Allergy and Smoking by Age Group, we can look at the data points and identify the age group of 60 to 70 as an outlier. That is over here, if you see. As the other age groups show increasing encounters within allergies and smoking habits. Now, over the last few minutes, we have been analyzing the patient's population encounter data by various factors as designated by the owner of this dashboard. However, a hospital admin might be interested in more information beyond what has been presented in the series of visuals. They also may not be well versed with interacting with the dashboard and prefer to draw insights using natural language, more like a chat interface. So this is where Amazon Q for QuickSight can help, as a generative BI powered QA experience allows anyone to ask questions of their data with no additional training required. So let's assume we want to analyze how various health conditions such as heart conditions are dependent on other factors separate from those we have already explored in the dashboard. So we'll start by exploring the locations where heart conditions are most significant. And so we can navigate to Q bar as already seen on the screen, and we can simply input heart encounter hotspot. So as you can see earlier, as I was typing, Q was auto-completing parts of my question. So that's what search engine would do. Once this loads, we'll see that Q has generated a multi-visual response, including KPIs, like total heart rate encounters, a bar chart uh, showing a ranked list of cities by heart encounters, like tabular patient details and a textual summary of the information displayed on the visual. So now, before we look at the actual data, we can look at how Q interpreting our question and notice how the generic term hotspot was interpreted as top locations. Because we have set this in the earlier demo, we have already set this field for the particular column, right? This capability is enabled through a combination of QuickSight Q features, synonyms, and semantics, which the owner of the Q topic has previously set up, that Art had shown in the earlier demo. Looking at the full response, our question was interpreted as sum of encounters for heart as a filter on the heart condition field grouped by patient city. Now we asked for heart encounters, and Q interpreted heart as the value of the health condition data field. This is because the owner of the Q topic created a calculated field at the topic level, mapping common health conditions to keywords like heart or lung. We could easily change heart to another common condition like lung or asthma. And if we re-ask the question, it will change the filter value and show the cities with where patients have the most cases of that condition. That's how the question has been interpreted by the queue in this particular scenario, right? And we also have a few more options. And see, as I explained earlier, like the filter condition can be changed on the screen. That's what it's trying to show. Also, now what we can see is now you also have an option to export this table as a CSV for later use. By clicking the three dots and selecting the export to CSV, it will notify us when our CSV is complete. So let's do one more thing. So there's an additional feature for pinboard. So the commonly used ones can be used using pinboard. We can pin them. And when we later want to go through them, we can just go and ask, like we can just check the pinboard and it'll automatically show. So this might be useful for frequently used pinboard, like frequently used dashboards. So that's where the pinboard feature is used. So as you can see on the left, I've already pinned a lung encounter hotspots for before this demo. So yeah, that's that. And you can also share this using a clipboard, or you can share it via a link. So whoever has access to this can get access directly in that way. I'm going to talk about more about access in the later part of the demo. And yeah, you can also go and click on Q and ask more questions. So like, where was this? How was this top dashboard has been created? Like this particular visual, what question was asked and why was it given? So you can see if you click on that Q, it's gonna give us like what is the exact question we had asked. And you can also change the visual type by clicking on that as it's seen on the demo. So you can change it to a number chart, or you can sort it by increasing or decreasing. You can do all of that if you don't like what is exactly being given on the visual. So you can feel free to modify it and change it however you want. And yeah, as shown earlier, you can export it as CSV also. So the CSV is ready. Now that said, we can also continue exploring about heart conditions and how patient behaviors are influencing them. So we can ask questions like how many patients have a heart condition who are smokers. So these insights will be based on the binary field in the data set of smoker, right? And the topic owner has set up data synonyms. So value of 0 are marked as non-smokers, and the values of 1 are marked as smokers. Q has responded to our question with total number of patients who both smoke and have a heart condition, as well as line chart showing the number of patients who have heart condition broken down by smokers and non-smokers. I just want to quickly pause over here and I want to just go over. I want to take a note that here, due to regulated industries, customers may not want to reveal their patient details to all their users. So Amazon Q for QuickSight follows a shared responsibility model like other AWS services, giving customer the choice to access or restrict certain sensitive information using fine-grained access controls, which already talked about at. As a topic owner, you can restrict access to certain fields by excluding them from the topic, such as patient SSN. Additionally, the owner can enforce row-level security to allow users to only view the respective patient's data instead of all the patient's data. So if you see on the screen, whoever is the user who is trying to log into QuickSight, based on their permissions, these data being suggested is also all like honored to that. Like let's say like I'm a heart surgeon and just want to see only heart related data. So you can do that and just put that behind the scenes. And whenever I log in and ask questions, it will show only heart condition related information, not any other like lung condition or anything else. So if you want to do that, you can do that behind the scenes. That's how row level and column level security works within QuickSight 2. And it is honored on Q as well with QuickSight with Q. So coming back to our exploration, now let's ask for a monthly trend of heart encounters. To view the changes of heart conditions over time, once we submit our question, Q is going to respond with few analysis, but we are primarily interested in the first line graph. So we can select to expand the visual to look closer by exploring this visual. We can see that there is a spike of heart related to encounters during January of 2023. and we are interested in finding out what factors cause the spike. But before we continue exploring, I want to pause to think about what we could have asked, or like what we could have do to ask this question using traditional methods like SQL, right? So we would have to apply a hard condition filter, summarize by month, and filter the time series using relative data periods, right? This is not a trivial query to write even for someone who has high data literacy. Never mind a non-technical user who would have had to submit a report request into a queue and maybe would receive an answer weeks later, right? So here's the power of Q, making it easier and faster for surface these kind of key insights. Now coming back to our exploration, we're still not done with our line of questions. We identified that there was a spike, right? So related to encounters in January of 23. But in order to take action on this, we need to understand why. So we're going to directly ask the question as seen on the screen, and we'll return the most influential contributing factors for the anomaly as compared to the previous month. From the results, two significant key drivers for the spike in heart conditions seem to be related to specific medical clinic and ethnic group. So two areas which may want to explore further to better understand which causes spike and how to address it. Now taking a step back from our analysis, you may have seen demos from other vendors that looking something like, however, not all search tools with analytical space are created equally, right? Most tools will give users a search like experience using faceted search, which requires users to learn how to ask questions in a particular way using the tool's syntax. However, Amazon Q for QuickSight is built using natural language processing and allows users to ask questions just how they would naturally think of them. Additionally, a faceted search would not understand terms like why, and this was one of the questions asked in the queries as well on the live chat. So this is where Amazon Q is fundamentally different from other search tools as it is powered by natural language processing, so it can truly understand the intent of a question, not just purely searching based on keywords. So before we move on to from our Q&A exploration, I want to point out that when users uh, first ask Q panel, there is a list of starting questions as seen on the screen. Sorry, just let me go back. Yeah, I'll say list of questions, right? You'll notice that some of them have this check mark indicating over here, uh, check mark indicating that these are verified questions, whereas other questions have a sparkle, right? Like this over here, if you see, making them as AI generated. So verified questions are those that have been reviewed and marked as accurate by topic owners. The topic owner can also control which questions are displayed for users here, helping them to get started. Even that can be controlled. So having finished our exploration and additional analysis, we are going to minimize the Q&A window and we're going to demonstrate two other generative BI features, that is the executive summary and data stories. So coming back to the dashboard, we can go and build at the top right and select executive summary. So I think it went to the start, sorry. Sorry for that, let me just. Yeah. Yeah, having finished our exploration and additional analysis, we are going to minimize the Q&A window and we are going to demonstrate two other features which we are talking about, executive summary and data stories. On the right, if you see on the top right and select executive summary, after a short wait, let's just let me play this for a second and yeah, then pause. Yeah, you can see that this will create a summary of insights that QuickSight has generated for the dashboard. So making it easier to find key insights and information about a dashboard at a glance. Looking at the bullet points generated, we can see some key insights were highlighted about decreasing encounters for month over month, top age groups by total immunization, ethnic groups with most encounters, and more. We can click on the underlined portion of the insights and it will take us to the related visual on the dashboard. So when we select the insights about the age groups or an ethnic groups, it takes us to the related visuals that we already explored when we were first looking at the dashboard. You can imagine how this executive summary would be useful for users who have never seen the dashboard before, right? So allowing them to see key insights and quickly navigate to the visuals that they are most interested in. Sorry, I'm having a lot of trouble with this. Um, Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, just a second. Yeah. The next thing is, yeah. The next thing is data story. So when you click on the data story and you can type out, you can describe the story you want to generate. So someone has asked this on the chat as well. So right now I want to create analysis of patient demographics and facilities and facilitate the data, right? So there's a bunch of visuals which have been generated. You can click and choose whichever you want. And what you're trying to effectively do is that you're making the generative BI understand that, hey, based on these visuals, I just want to populate my story narrative around that. So now the entire narrative is being built around these visuals which we have chosen. So as you see, it has automatically generated understanding our patient's demographics, and we can apply different sorts of schemes to it and make it more appealing. And you see, it has taken the consideration of whatever data we are given. It is also interactive, and it has also generated a summary out of it. See, as shown in the demographic dashboard, outpatient encounters compromise the major data quality and all of that. So you can pick and choose. You can change the data. You can alter it however you want. Maybe you want to highlight or maybe make some one of the statements bold or something like that. So you can feel free to do that as well. So this is not like these are some of the visual changes which you can do. Let's say you're not satisfied with whatever summary it has given to you. So you can just say you can extend it or maybe shorten it or maybe you can change it to bullet points. So I just clicked on make longer. So the narrative is being extended for now. So yeah, you see the current narrative is much larger than what it was earlier. So if you like it, you can keep it, or if you don't like it, you can just discard it. So that's how you can go ahead and edit it. Let's say there is one more distribution, like you can see one more visual over there. You have different blocks. So maybe this is more important to you. So you can move it up. So that way the gender breakdown has gone up. So you can move it up or down. You can change those visuals however you want, those narratives. And for an end user to make this, it's going to take some amount of time. However, by using this natural language and just choosing some of the visuals, you're able to quickly generate that. And also, if you see, let me pause for a second. You're able to see this, uh, like in the how the end user would see. So that's what I wanted to highlight over here. So earlier we were in editor mode. Now we are in the final revised view mode. So you can pick and choose to share this. So you can just type the user whom you want to share it with. So you can just type there and test reader in this scenario. So you can choose publish and share. Or if you do this, and then only you can share the copy link, like you can share the link with them. If they don't have access, they'll not be able to get that. So that's about it. And yeah, I want to give back the screen to Jackson.
Awesome. Thank you, Kalyan. I'll share my screen really quick. And if you don't mind, can you just confirm for me when you're able to see? We should be back on the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I can see the screen. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks for doing that demo. That was great. So now we're going to move on to the last section of this session, looking at embedding QuickSight assets, and specifically focusing on embedding the generative Q&A functionality that we just saw in that demo. So at a high level, QuickSight supports embedding different assets from individual visuals to full dashboards and even the entire console for authoring. We also already had support for embedding the classic Q search bar, which was the sort of predecessor to the current generative Q&A experience that we have now. But using the Amazon QuickSight APIs and the Embedding SDK, you can also now embed the generative multi-visual Q&A experience directly into your web applications. So you can do all of the topic preparation and enrichment within the QuickSight console that Art described earlier, configuring and optimizing your Q topics to your specific use cases and data contexts, and then embed the Q&A functionality to let your application users ask questions directly to the Q topics themselves. And just as with the other embedding options like visuals and dashboards, you can white label your QuickSight assets into your application, customizing the size, placement, theme, and interactions to seamlessly fit with your website and brand. So I briefly mentioned the QuickSight Embedding SDK on the previous slide, which some of you may already be familiar with. But I want to highlight that in March of last year, the SDK version 2.0 was released to enhance the developer experience. So the QuickSight Embedding SDK is a JavaScript library that allows developers to integrate analytics functionality into their products and applications. And version 2.0 adds several customization improvements, such as an optional preloader and new external hooks for managing undo, redo, and print options, as well as working with parameters. Additionally, there are major rewrites to deliver developer-focused improvements, including static type checking, enhanced runtime validation, strong consistency in call patterns, and optimized event chaining. The SDK version 2.0 now supports TypeScript, ES6 or async and await syntax, and utility features that enable developers to quickly build analytics experiences within their applications. Also, with SDK 2.0, host applications are able to dynamically communicate with the embedded iframe where the QuickSight assets are embedded. So using info, warning, and error events, developers can monitor the embedded iframe lifecycle and react to different states in their applications. Additionally, while a dashboard or visual is being rendered, developers can display a loading spinner, minimizing the need to write custom logic. Furthermore, developers can also externalize, undo, and redo dashboard actions into their application, as well as retrieve and pass parameters more efficiently. And Amazon QuickSight also supports state persistence and bookmarks for embedded dashboards for registered users. So embedded QuickSight dashboards now remember the filter selections between visits when accessed as a registered QuickSight user. Registered users can also bookmark specific views of the embedded dashboard, making it simple to access your preferences from one convenient location. So for example, you can create a bookmark for an embedded dashboard with a specific set of values for the group different filters and controls. And this can be different than what it normally would load from the original dashboard. And using these bookmarks, you can quickly switch between relevant views without having to reinitialize and reset all those filter and control values. You can enable bookmarks and state persistence when calling the generate embed URL for registered user API for generating the embeddable QuickSight asset URLs. And we'll be talking about this API a little bit more in just a couple slides. But one more enhancement I want to highlight is that QuickSight also supports embedded callback actions, enabling users to take actions based on data and insights. So in many cases, the actions that users want to take is to kick off or stop a process in another system. For example, you may want to move orders and shipments from one fulfillment center to another, or adjust workloads between service personnel, or adjust the time threshold to getting initial patient triage. And these are all different scenarios based off your specific use case, but these are all different custom actions that you might want to do based on insights that are taken directly from your dashboards. So instead of the user having to find a disjoint way to enable those actions, QuickSight enables developers to kick off workflows in other applications by building a custom experience on data point interactions. So you can imagine that a user is doing actions X, Y, and Z on the dashboard. Then the developer can build an experience to hook into those events to trigger custom actions and continue the user journey to another part of the application with contextual data. Developers can get access to user activity within embedded analytics to build these data-rich experiences. We provide callback events in the SDK, such as developers can subscribe to events when a reader clicks on a data point, such as a cell in a table. In this example on screen, when a user clicks on a specific cell, both the raw data and the contextual data, such as the row and column labels, will be returned as part of the event and can then be used as part of the subsequent custom action or experience. Now, before you use the SDK to embed QuickSight assets, you must first generate a link to that asset, which is done using our APIs. And we have two APIs depending on your use case: generate embed URL for registered or anonymous user. As a quick overview for anyone who's unfamiliar with these APIs, the API for registered users is used when individual application users are registered as QuickSight users as well. Whereas in an anonymous use case, no user management within QuickSight is required. The use of these different APIs have implications on user management, pricing, and embedding options, but we'll not be focusing on those differences in this session. Instead, regardless of whether you're embedding in a user-based or anonymous use case, For each API call, you have to define an experience configuration, which basically means you have to define the type of QuickSight asset that you want. This can be a visual, a dashboard, the console if you're using registered users, and the Q search bar for the classic Q search experience for older Q topics created without the generative Q&A capabilities. However, with the launch of the generative Q&A experience, you can now set this as the experience configuration when calling these APIs. Now, when you define this property in the API call, it will return a URL to the QuickSight asset for the Q&A experience, which you can then embed directly into your applications. And for the embedding URL that's returned from the previous API, you can either place it directly into an iframe or use the embedding SDK. Each of the different embeddable QuickSight assets has their own embedding method within the SDK, like embed visual or embed dashboard. And now with the updated SDK for the generative Q&A, it now has its own method, embed generative Q&A. The method definition is shown on the slide here. And just as with the rest of the existing embed methods, you can pass in the frame options and content option parameters. There are no changes to the frame options argument from the other embedding methods if you're familiar with this parameter from using the SDK. But the optional content options parameter now accepts a few new properties when using this method, which we'll see on the next slide. So looking closer at the properties available for content options when using the generative Q&A method, we've split them up into two categories here. The first are options that are shared with the existing embed Q search method for embedding the classic Q search bar that I mentioned earlier. These options allow you to define an event listener, to hide the Q topic name, to set the theme, and for allowing or restricting the ability for users to be able to select from multiple Q topics. As these have already existed within the previous Q search experience, we will instead be focusing on the properties below, which are new for the generative Q&A method. So the first of these is the panel options property, which is where you select from two embedding modes, full and search bar. And we'll be looking closer at these options in the next slide. But the other options allow you to show or hide the pinboard, to set a placeholder text in the question bar, and to allow or restrict the ability to make the Q&A experience full screen. So looking closer at the panel options property, I mentioned that you can choose between full or search bar, and these are defined in the subproperty of panel type. If you've selected the panel type to be full, then the experience will be a full Q&A panel whose height will not change based on any user interaction. In this configuration, you'll also have the ability to set a title and to show or hide the Q icon. And we'll see what this actually means and what this actually looks like in a demo in just a second. But if you instead have selected the panel type as search bar, then the experience will be a search bar that expands when users ask questions. As this panel expands, when using this configuration, you can define the height of the expanded panel with the focus and expanded height properties. So that was just a quick introduction to the new generative Q&A embedding options with both the APIs and the SDK. But now we can move to a short demo to see what this really looks like. So in this demo, we'll be demonstrating the configuration options available with the QuickSight Embedding SDK for embedding the generative Q&A experience that we just covered in the previous slides. And we will start by signing into our demo website, where we've used the Embedding SDK to embed some QuickSight assets. After we log in here on this first page, you'll notice that there are two separate assets that have been embedded. The first is an example sales dashboard, which is fully interactive. And then above this dashboard, the generative Q&A experience has been embedded as a search bar. This is a separate asset from the dashboard beneath it, and here we can ask questions to a pre-configured QuickSight Q topic. Notice how it starts as just a search bar, but it will expand when we ask or select a question. So when we ask our questions, Q will generate an interactive multi-visual response with a narrative insight, just as it responded directly in the QuickSight console as we saw earlier. Now, a couple things I want to point out here are the options to go full screen at the top right, and then also the option to open the pinboard, which is at the top left. This is where we can see those previously saved Q responses. We can also collapse the Q panel back to just the search bar when we're finished with our questions. So to look at how we've configured this embedding asset, we can move to the backend to view our code. Here we can see that we were using the Embedding SDK's embed generative Q&A method, passing in the two parameters for frame options and content options, which we've defined above. So within the frame options parameter, we've defined the two required properties. The first is the URL of the QuickSight asset, which was generated using the generate embed URL for registered user API. And the second is the container, which is just the parent HTML element where the asset will be embedded. Both of these have been defined elsewhere in our code, so we're simply referencing their values here. But below frame options, we've defined the content options parameter. Remember that this is an entirely optional parameter, but here we provided some values for panel options. This is where we've defined the panel type as search bar, which is why it was generating as such back in our website. We've also defined the focused and expanded heights properties, which control the size of the panel when it's expanded. So we've seen what our website looks like with this configuration, but we can go ahead and define some other properties and see how they change the embedded asset. So we're simply going to define 3 more properties for the content options parameter. These will be the 3 new ones that we looked at on the slides. So the first will be setting the value of show pinboard to false to remove the option to access the pinboard. The default value is true, which is why we can currently see the pinboard, despite not having explicitly defined this property previously. Similarly, we can set the value of allow full screen to false, which is also true by default. And then finally, we can use the search placeholder text property to set a custom default message to populate the search bar before users start typing their question. So now that we've defined these properties, we can save and push our code and move back to our website. Here we can refresh our page and see the changes take effect. Remember that there were 3 changes made. The first was to hide the pinboard option. And we'll see that we can no longer have the option to open the pinboard, which was that old pin icon that we were seeing previously. The next was to add the placeholder text, which we can see reflected here in that light gray. And the last was to remove the full screen option. So if we quickly ask a question to expand the panel, we can no longer see the full screen option at the top right next to where we can provide feedback. Now within the website, we actually have another tab here where we've embedded the full Q experience. So instead of being just an expandable search bar, this is a full interactive panel where users can start asking questions. If we ask the same questions that we did previously, we'll see that the response from Q is the same. But now we're seeing it on the full page. Notice that we have the same options as before to both access the pinboard and to go full screen. So full screen at the top right and then pinboard at the top left. Now if we come back to the original landing page, I also just want to point out the Q icon that we have at the center here, as well as the default topic title here. And we'll be changing the related properties shortly. So moving back to our backend code, this is the portion where the full Q panel has been configured. Once again, we're using the same embed generative Q&A method from the Embedding SDK, again passing in the frame options and content options parameters. But this time, we have different options configured within the content options. Here, we have once again defined the panel options, but notice how this time the value of panel type has been set to full instead of search bar. Because this is set to full, we don't have to configure the focused or expanded height properties as we did previously, as they're no longer applicable. But now we're going to make a few changes here. So first, since we're using the full panel type, we can now define a title and control if the Q icon will be shown. So within the panel options, we will set the value of title to something like example title. And then we'll choose to hide the Q icon by setting this show Q icon to false. We can also go ahead and add the same properties as before to content options, as these are applicable for both panel types. So we'll choose to hide the pinboard, not allow full screen, and set an example placeholder text. Now we can save and push our code. In just a second, we'll move back to our website and refresh the page. After we refresh our page, it'll bring us back to the Search Q tab, so we just have to navigate back to the Full Q tab. Here, we should see our changes reflected. So notice that we can no longer see the pinboard option at the top left, nor the full screen option at the top right. We have our placeholder text in the search bar in that light gray. The large blue Q icon has been removed, but we can see our example title reflected there in the center. So that was just a brief demo showing the different options for embedding the new generative Q&A experience using the QuickSight Embedding SDK. We saw the two primary options for the full panel versus the search bar and their associated properties, as well as the additional configuration options for the pinboard, full screen, and placeholder text. So with that, we can move on from our demo to the last few slides. And that's the end of the content that we're covering in this session. Before we wrap up, we have a quick call to action and some additional resources for your reference. So first, there was a blog release last month covering how you can build industry solutions using Amazon Q and QuickSight. And it contains links to lots of great resources that are organized under the Generative AI Center of Excellence for AWS Partners, which is found in Partner Central. The resources found there cover how the AWS partner ecosystem can support you, help you market, and get alignment for co-selling opportunities. Move to the next slide. I want to also highlight the QuickSight Partner Learning Journey, which is a self-service learning resource for upskilling with QuickSight. And this has 4 learning plans. The first is the Level 100 Foundational course for getting started with QuickSight. And then there are 3 Level 300 courses covering BI development, BI architecture, and BI migration. And these can be accessed in AWS Skills Builder by logging in with your Partner Central account. So that's the end of our session here. Thank you all so much for coming and for all your patience with our technical difficulties. We can stick around for a few minutes to make sure that any last questions are answered in the chat. But when you leave, we would really appreciate if you can complete the session survey that should pop up when you exit the session. All your feedback is really valuable and really, really appreciated and is used to make sure that we can keep improving as we continue having these sessions.